Hi, my name is Jan Wilczek from thewolfsound.com. Welcome to WolfTalk, a podcast about audio programming. In this podcast, you will learn how to build your career in programming or research related to audio, meet programmers and researchers from all around the world, and learn about the intricacies of sound. Hi everyone, and welcome to the 15th episode of the WolfTalk podcast. Today I have another very special guest for you, namely Oliver Larkin, a rock star in the world of audio programming. He comes from Great Britain, and I think he's most widely known for being the creator of the iPlug2 framework, which is a kind of alternative to JUCE, where you can have one code base and build various plugin formats and also easily create a graphical user interface. But not only this, he's the inventor, so he co-inventor of web audio modules, and he's also very well known for his own plugins. For example, virtual emulation in various forms of the Casio CZ-101 synthesizer. He worked for Arturia, he worked for Focusrite, he now works for Ableton in Berlin, and it's hard for me to imagine if there's a place in the audio programming space that he has not yet explored. We personally met at the Digital Audio Effects Conference 2022, and he'll be presenting at the Audio Developers Conference 2023, so we'll also meet there, and I'm extremely happy to be able to finally interview him. This interview was recorded on October the 25th, 2023, and all the people, places, and the references mentioned in this podcast can be found under thewolfsound.com/talk015. And before we delve into the interview, two quick announcements. So one is that I'll be also presenting at the Audio Developers Conference 2023. So if you have a chance to visit my talk, which will be on making sure that your audio software really works and it doesn't break, then I highly encourage you to listen to it. Typically, the YouTube recordings start to appear around 2 months after the conference, and then gradually all the talks or most of the talks are published. And the second announcement is that if you would like to follow Oli Larkin's footsteps and you're curious which pieces of knowledge are needed for it, then I highly encourage you to grab the free audio plugin developer checklist. It's a free checklist that lists every bit of knowledge that is necessary to become an audio plugin developer. And you can get it for free at thewolfsound.com/checklist. And now, Oli Larkin. Hi, Oli. Thanks for agreeing on this interview. Could you introduce yourself to the audience?
Hello. Thanks for having me. I'm Oli Larkin. I am an audio programmer, C++ software engineer by day, and also doing lots of stuff by night. I developed the iPlug2 audio plugin framework. I've developed several audio plugins over the years, and I've been working, or at least interested in the whole world of audio software development for quite a long time now, around 20 years. I used to work in academia, and nowadays I am in the industry, so I work at Ableton. And yeah.
That's really amazing. That's really amazing, and I hope we can delve into each of these topics along the way today. We met, I think, over 1 year ago, and since then I really wanted to do this podcast. I'm really excited that it's finally happening. So could you maybe share, where did your interest in music start?
Well, my father is really passionate about music and always had a vast amount of CDs and interesting musical instruments like sitar, the Indian sitar, and he played guitar a lot, sang a bit. So yeah, I think I probably get it from him. He was never a professional musician, but he would play a lot, play music a lot, listen to music a lot. And yeah, I started learning classical guitar when I went to secondary school when I was around 11 years old, and sort of fell in with the music crowd at school. So it was it sort of developed from being interested in playing music to being interested in recording music when I was at school. So yeah, that's how it started.
Okay, and how did you went from recording music then to audio programming?
So recording music became more producing music, and when I was sort of in my late teens, I was interested a lot in electronic music and trying to use modular synthesizers and things like this to make interesting sounds. I mean, this was all on the computer. I didn't have any hardware synthesizers at the time. But I gradually wanted to make more and more interesting sound design, and that led me to the more sort of the programs that let you go a bit deeper, and I started to want to make my own oscillators or my own filters and these kind of building blocks that you can then use in a bigger patch inside something like SynthEdit or Max MSP. So that was really my first step towards doing audio programming, making these little components that would slot into the bigger modular synthesizer program.
And did you already start dabbling into this quasi-programming stuff or programming stuff, depending on how you classify Max, before your university? Or was it already when you went to university?
It was really when I went to university that I was introduced to Max. At the time I went to university, I was sort of thinking I was more interested in music production. I didn't really plan on becoming a software engineer at that point. So yeah, I went to Huddersfield University in the north of England, which had a lot of composers who work with Max and do what might be called acousmatic or electroacoustic music, and we had a few modules on the university course where I got to learn Max MSP. I think it was 1 year of Max, which was just like MIDI processing basically, and then the second year we did MSP, which was the real-time audio signal processing. And this was when Max MSP had very sharp corners on all the boxes. So nowadays everything's a bit curvy, but back then it was on Mac OS 9, and everything looked a bit different.
Yeah, that's so true. And how did you go from Max to then learning C++? Because as I understand, you learned C++ entirely on your own.
Yeah, pretty much. I did have some courses in that at university as well, but a very small part of the curriculum. And yeah, it was really kind of my own initiative to learn C++. And yeah, that really started because I was using Max and I was using SynthEdit, and they both have SDKs, software development kits, which let you build these unit generators or modules or little components that you slot into the main program. I wanted to make these things. I'm just remembering now. It's a long time ago, but at that time, Max was a C only SDK, so I was learning bits of C programming for Max. SynthEdit was a C++ SDK, but basically, by focusing on these small components, I was able to kind of limit the kind of task that I was trying to accomplish to something that was relatively manageable. I built several collections of objects or modules or unit generators for both of these environments. Funnily enough, I got an email yesterday of someone asking if I had a copy of a SynthEdit module that I made 20 years ago, and I have no idea where that is now. So I had to say no, I'm sorry. Anyway,
there was no GitHub back then, right?
Yeah, this was before GitHub. It was before everyone was into version control. There was a little bit of information on the internet about how to do things, and there was a website called musicdsp.org which had various code snippets. So I would often be taking some code from there and trying to put it into a Max object or a SynthEdit object. I did have the goal of developing VST plugins entirely in C++, but I really struggled for quite a long time to reach that level of understanding, because back in that time there was the available resources were very different to what they are now. JUCE wasn't such a big thing. This is before I discovered iPlug, and basically you had the Steinberg VST SDK, which had two examples that didn't really show you very much and didn't compile. So it was really a very big hurdle to develop a plugin entirely in C++. But by working with these plugin SDKs that were a bit simpler, I gradually got more and more confident until I was eventually able to switch and to make my plugins entirely in C++.
Well, that's awesome, and I think it's great that this was a very practical learning. So you wanted to do concrete stuff in musical terms, in, let's say, production terms, and you wanted to use C++ as a tool to achieve those goals. And basically C++ allowed you to cross the limitations of the tools that you were using before, like Max or SynthEdit. And I feel that's way more different than how people think about C++ now. They often come to the audio programming field and they want to learn C++, but C++ in general, whereas you did learn it for specific purposes. I think it's a very important hint that anyone could take home. And we're lucky to be alive in an era where the resources are so plentiful. So you were studying, you were learning C++ on your own. Then how did it happen that you landed, let's say, your first gig as an audio programmer?
So after I finished university, I wasn't really certain what kind of job I would get, but I was lucky that something came up which required skills in Max MSP, and I developed those a lot at university. So I was in quite a good position to do that. my first job was at the University of Leeds in the north of England, and I was working on a European research project, which was something that involved 9 different institutions, and it was a project called iMaestro, where basically people were trying to make some or a piece of software with lots of different, or that would cover lots of different aspects of music education, and yeah, basically the theme of this European project was to enhance music education with technology, and yeah, EarCam was involved. That's like a very famous research center in Paris, and they're also famous for using MaxMSP a lot. So yeah, they were using that for their part of the project, which involved these augmenting violins with sensors and things like this. But my lab at Leeds University was using a motion capture system, and we were putting lots of these reflective markers on cellists and on violin players, and we developed a system it was built using MaxMSP plus a lot of C++ externals or objects that allowed us to get that 3D tracking data from this motion capture system and to visualize that in OpenGL and do some sonification. And yeah, we built quite a nice tool that showed the cello in 3D with all of the different angles between the bow and the instrument and things like this. So yeah, that was a really, really fun project. I was a research assistant on that project, which was yeah, kind of a little bit strange that I managed to land that job because I hadn't done a master's and a PhD, which is normally the route that people take to then become a research assistant on a European research project. So I was a little bit into the deep end and writing lots of reports on deliverables that stated our progress and things like this. But I also got to do quite a lot of programming and got to go to lots of conferences like the ICMC, the International Computer Music Conference, and the NIME conference, the Conference on New Interfaces for Musical Expression. So yeah, that was a really good sort of stepping stone. And I did a bit of teaching at that time as well, but my main job was on this research project.
Awesome. And which year was it? Because this technology sounds pretty advanced.
That was 2006. Yeah.
Okay, great. So what was your next step then in your career?
So yeah, I worked on that project for just over 2 years, and because that was a fixed-term research project, the project ended, and then basically because of my experience on that project, I was able to get a job at the University of York, which is not so far from Leeds, and there I was. I had a position as a research support programmer, and I was also doing some sort of systems administration because they had a lot of old SGI servers back from before when Macs and PCs could do real-time audio. They had a big grant to do to get all these SGI machines, which are these absolutely massive blue. Well, there was a hard drive that was about 500 megabytes, and it was like a huge thing. And then we had all these little blue SGI O2 machines that I had to look after. So yeah, that was a very interesting job to get because there were some really cool research projects that the department was working on, and they were kind of collaborations with arts organizations a bit more than they were typical university research projects. So York University has a reputation for doing lots of research in spatial audio, and in particular ambisonics, which is a certain kind of spatial audio. And we were basically commissioned to help with a very large-scale sound art project called The Morning Line, which was this pavilion which had around 50 loudspeakers inside it, several different areas where composers would basically they'd write a piece for the sculpture, and they'd position sound in these different areas, and the sound would often be rendered using ambisonics. Other techniques were used as well, but this was a really, really exciting project to be involved with, because this pavilion was installed in several different European cities, and it was even in Istanbul, in the most amazing location, right by the Bosphorus and all by these big mosques, and it was a fantastic experience. There were lots of very famous sound artists who were commissioned to write pieces for the sculpture, so we worked closely with them to realize their works for it, and it was just a really good fun, a really good opportunity for me.
Well, that really sounds amazing. And did you have to learn about ambisonics from scratch, or were you already familiar at this point with ambisonics?
I hadn't done anything with ambisonics before that, but my colleague at the time, Dave Mallon, was a kind of one of the main people who was keeping the fire burning for this particular spatial audio technique, which was originally developed in the 1970s, but actually at that time there weren't that many people using it, but he was one of the sort of world authorities on this format for spatial audio. Of course, anyone who knows about spatial audio at all will know that when VR became a big thing in the last 10 or so years, ambisonics was suddenly very popular again, because it's the perfect spatial audio technique for that format, because it's very easy to rotate the sound field, just like what you need to do if someone's wearing a VR headset and you need to keep the sound coherent. I was lucky to have a real expert to ask about the technique, and to be honest, it was a fairly well understood problem at that time, but I did a lot of work developing software, again using Maxim SP to realize these very massively multi-channel spatial compositions which allow people to work with ambisonics or other techniques and position sounds in various areas of the sculpture. So that was mainly the challenge there, and often like trying to realize these compositions on very tight deadlines, because every time this pavilion moved to a different place, there was a concert, and the compositions had to be realized just in time for the concert and stuff like this. So we had a world expert in house, so it was easy for me to learn.
That's definitely helps. You mentioned that you were teaching at this time also at the university or on York. So could you tell a little bit about this experience? How was it like, and what were the biggest challenges, if you still remember, that people new to the field of audio programming face?
Yeah, so although I wasn't officially a lecturer, I did do a bit of teaching because I had some expertise in Max, and I did some C programming teaching as well on the Master's Music Technology course. and yeah, it was good, but it was a challenge because often on these kinds of courses you have people from all sorts of different backgrounds with different kinds of technical experience, and you can probably tell from the kind of things that I do, but I like to do programming that has some kind of useful musical outcome, and especially with low-level programming languages like C, it's very hard, like even over a year-long university course, for people to get to the kind of level where they can really create something that's useful or different to what else is already available. Or so yeah, it was challenging, but I like to try and always keep the examples that I would use musical, and yeah, sort of try and help people get even people who might not end up doing low-level coding or even using Max as a programmer. Try to kind of give them like bits of information and ready-made patches that I had that illustrated things that I had learned that might be useful for them going forward in whatever way they would take their degree. So yeah, of course some people really loved it and got really stuck in, and for other people it was really probably their least favorite part of the course. But yeah, it was nice to have all sorts of different kinds of students together working on projects. So yeah, I think these days it will probably be a lot easier because there's, as you said before, there's so much more available online in terms of very robust frameworks like JUCE and iPlug, or lots of YouTube channels such as your own, where people can learn about these things. They don't have to rely so much on course materials or textbooks that might be out of date and this kind of thing.
Yeah, definitely. And I think I can understand the impression that you got, because I also attended C++ audio programming courses, and as you said, there were people who loved it and wanted even more, and there were people who really hated it and didn't want to have anything to do with programming later on. So it really depends on the individual. Okay, and after your position at the University of York, where did your path then take you?
So yeah, I was at York for 7 years. Yeah, because of my sort of slightly strange route into academia, like most people, friends of mine who work in academia these days, they did an undergraduate degree, then they did a master's degree, and then they did a PhD, and then they started applying for postdocs or research assistant jobs, and then they became a lecturer, and they followed a more obvious research career path. And yeah, I sort of found myself working in this environment, but I only had an undergraduate degree. And so I felt a little bit limited. Of course, I was also doing lots of plugin development on the side. But yeah, I felt like I wasn't able to really develop my career without getting a PhD, basically. So I did go to study one, and I wasn't totally sure actually at that time, because I was doing a lot of plugin development, and yeah, I'd released Virtual CZ at that time, and it was doing quite well. So I sort of was thinking maybe I could also go into the industry at that stage. But I thought, I've got so much experience in working in universities, I should get the PhD so that I maybe can come back here, even if I want to go into industry for a bit. So I went to study a PhD at Huddersfield again. I was working a lot once again with Ambisonics because they have some very nice spatial audio setups there, and I had access to some really amazing facilities. They have a studio called The Spiral, which has got like 25 Genelec 8040s, I think, and it's really nicely soundproof. And I had a lot of access to this facility. And also my second supervisor, Hyung-Kook Lee, in the engineering department, had a really amazing spatial audio lab there. And he is a real world expert in the field at the moment. So I learnt an awful lot about the process of binauralization of all sorts of audio formats. But I was working with Ambisonics a lot because I was very interested in that format. And fortunately with Ambisonics, when you want to work in higher orders, which is what gets you better spatial fidelity, you need to have lots of loudspeakers to decode onto. So I was making the most of it, and I did that for 3 years, but I wasn't the best PhD student in the world, and I was a bit distracted with various other things going on in my life, and I had I was quite excited at this point about the iPlug2 project. Also, I had the chance to work with Arturia at this time, and it's I'm not very proud of it, but I was doing all sorts of different things. And if you're doing a PhD, you really need to focus on the PhD. So I ended up leaving that PhD without completing it. But I learnt an awful lot about those technologies, and I feel like I got a lot out of those years. I'm still passionate about spatial audio, which maybe we'll talk about in a bit, but yeah.
Yeah, so I understand that you simply cannot do everything, and if you have a lot of good or very good opportunities, you simply need to pick one of them. You cannot pursue them all.
Yeah.
So yeah. I totally understand. So if I understand correctly, while you had those permanent positions, you started developing plugins then on the side. Is it correct?
Yeah. So the first plugin I released was called Endless Series, and this is it's like a modulation effect that's based on the Shepherd tone auditory illusion. And I released the version 1 of that in 2003 when I was still studying at Huddersfield University, and that was built with SynthEdit. Then when I was working at Leeds University, I released version 2 of Endless Series, and that was built with MaxMSP and Plug-O, which was the technology that predated Max for Live, which allowed you to export plugins from Max patches. And then in 2011, I released Endless Series version 3 when I was working at York University, and that was a fully C++ plugin that was built with iPlug2. No, sorry, iPlug1. iPlug2 didn't exist at that stage. Yeah.
And so Endless Series, I understand it was your original idea. And can you maybe expand on this and tell a little bit about your other? I know you have a lot of plugins, but could you maybe name the ones that are most important to you, and how did you come up with those ideas? And how would you maybe encourage others, or could you give some tips to others on how to make their plugins stand out in the ways that yours did, obviously.
Yeah, I mean, it's an extremely crowded marketplace these days, saturated marketplace. So it's a real challenge, also because because so many more people are able to develop plugins because of things like JUCE, and because there's so many more resources, there's lots more people doing it. And so, yeah, you do have to make something that stands out. And yeah, Ender Series is an original plugin, and in this circumstance, I sort of got really interested in this particular technique, which the shepherd tone is quite well known, but it's not been. There's not loads of plugins out there that let you do it. I think at the time there was one by MDA, which is one of the earliest collections of free VST plugins that was available. But apart from that, I don't think there were any other shepherd tone plugins at the time. And that project started because I was actually doing. I did an essay for one of the modules at the university about this particular technique, and I did lots of research into how it had been used in early electronic music. There was composers like Jean-Claude Risset who would work with very early versions of what is now C-Sound, or I think it was called Music 5, I think, which is this really old computer music language that he would have written his compositions with. And I was really inspired by a lot of these early pioneers of computer music, and I really, really enjoyed sort of researching these early synthesis technique papers, finding old articles in ICMC proceedings or AES journals, like all these synthesis techniques that were developed in the 80s or maybe late 70s and 80s, when the people didn't have computers where they could try it out in real time, like or patch something together in Max or anything like that. They had to write a program, sometimes on punch cards, and wait days for the results to come out. Yeah, I found that really amazing, and I just enjoyed like trying to find out as much from the literature as I could about a particular technique, and then take some of those ideas and play around with them in Max or SynthEdit, and try and connect up the amplitude curves that you use to make a shepherd tone to delay lines instead of oscillators, and that's roughly how you make a shepherd tone flanger, that kind of thing. So yeah, it was just a sort of curiosity and experimental approach that led me to finding something which I thought could make a product that was different to what was available on the market. And in terms of Virtual CZ, which is my other main plugin that I've developed myself, that came about because, again, I was fascinated by the phase distortion synthesis technique, and I was trying to implement phase distortion oscillators in Max, and to do so I would do things like looking at the Casio patents from a long time ago, which have all these drawings of the waveforms, and I made a Max patch that basically did the phase distortion synthesis algorithm a bit like on the CZ-101 synthesizer. I released that, and then actually I started to think I'm forgetting actually the sequence of events here, but I got the opportunity to make a Max for Live device for Ableton. Like, this was when Max for Live had just come out, and they wanted to package some devices built with Max for Live, or to put them on their website and make Ableton Live packs that could be installed. So yeah, I had this Casio emulation Max patch, and I thought this was a good candidate to turn into a Max for Live device. And I tried to make some preset sounds that sounded just like the Casio CZ-101 preset sounds, and they were pretty close. And I later saw a post on the KVR forum from the people who are setting up Plugin Boutique, which is the plugin store who market Virtual CZ, and we discussed. They were asking to speak to plugin developers because they wanted to make some in-house products, and we discussed the kind of things that I had developed and what I thought might make a good product. And basically, no one had done a good Casio VST. There was really good DX7 emulations, but this particular vintage synthesizer that was one of the most or best-selling synthesizers in the 80s because it was cheap. It has a bit of a reputation as this kind of cheesy-sounding thing, but also lots of people really like it. And I thought this would make a good product that could actually shift some copies, because lots of people have got fond memories of these synthesizers. It was a sound. It's got sounds that were used on lots of classic dance music tracks in the 80s, early 90s. And yeah, I felt like I wasn't so far off a good emulation of this, and it would be a good thing to develop into a product. So that's how that project started, and yeah, it has been quite a success. Yeah, so that also eventually, because I had a DSP library for emulating Casio sounds, that eventually led to the collaboration with Arturia, who have their plugin CZV, which takes my emulation engine and extends it even further, improves the emulation, adding in all sorts of complex modulations that weren't on the original device. And yeah, it's got a lot of extra cool features, like a really amazing preset browser and things like this. So yeah, it's I still like Virtual CZ, and I like to use both of them, CZV and Virtual CZ, and there's various comparisons of the two things online on YouTube, which I find quite amusing. They aren't exactly the same, but yeah.
Well, that's really awesome, and I think yeah, if you love synthesizers and you are able to make your own, which emulates the one that you liked from your early days, and it's commercially successful, and it leads to future contract work or collaborations, then I think it's really a dream fulfilled. And I've listened to the examples of your Virtual CZ. I think the ones you have on SoundCloud, and they're really spectacular. And I will link to them in the episode notes for sure. And yeah, I think it's also a very good tip that was maybe a little bit hidden. But I found it all out also recently with the autotune. It's really great to look at patents that expired and see the technology beyond some maybe old inventions, but still the ones that were groundbreaking. And this is quite a fascinating exercise to now program the stuff, using modern frameworks and modern C++ that were secretly there were patented to be preserved back in the day. So thank you also for this. And I guess correctly then, once your plugins were kind of known in the community, and you also had a lot of personal contacts with various companies, then you started to get more and more contract work for plugins?
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, at this time, there weren't so many audio programmers easily Googleable, or there wasn't a big Discord community full of people looking for jobs to do with JUCE and things like this. So yeah, I was able to get lots of freelance jobs at the time, and I did lots of tuition as well. So did some 101 tuition, trying to teach people what I'd learned about making things with JUCE or iPlug or whatever. But yeah, there were several companies and people using iPlug, which led me to get some iPlug specific work at times as well. Because I basically with iPlug I took over this open source project that was originally developed by the developers of Reaper, and I sort of maintained it for several years. So I was quite visible as the iPlug guy, and still am, I guess. But
yeah. So
yeah, that
yeah. Sorry, please continue.
No, it's okay. Carry on.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So I definitely want to touch on iPlug, and I want to expand on this. But I wanted to ask: is there anything that comes to your mind that you could share with people, as you said, who are actively looking for freelance audio plugin jobs? Is also the audio programmer market saturated, or is there something that people can do to stand out?
I don't think it's actually saturated. I still see plenty of adverts for VST programmer required. Unfortunately, there's also a lot of people who've got unrealistic ideas about how much it costs to develop your own plugin. I'm talking about people who maybe don't have a technical background but think they've got a brilliant idea, and they think they can basically get something made on the cheap, and yeah, so that you see quite a lot of posts on the JUCE forum, for instance, about people looking for VST plugin developers. But those kinds of jobs, they're not always a bad thing to do. You obviously don't let anyone exploit you, but yeah, sometimes you can work on something that ends up being very successful, and use that experience to get your next gig. Yeah, it's you do need a kind of track record of products that you've ideally shipped. If you can make your own things that look very polished, and maybe put them on GitHub so people can see what clean code you write, or what skills you've got. That's a really good way of being visible. There's also a lot of people who get very involved in the online communities, kind of presenting their projects or other things like that. So you do have to make an effort to be visible these days, I think, because there are so many people who are visible via very prolific GitHub pages, or helping everyone on Discord communities and this kind of thing. So yeah, I think you need to have some evidence of some kind of track record of things that you've made. If you haven't had the opportunity to work for any known brands, make some open source things and try and make them as good as you possibly can. Yeah. You need a track.
Okay, that's yeah. Sorry.
No, carry on.
I'm just saying that it's a very, very solid piece of advice. So have some solid track record of the work you did, and ideally put this on GitHub. So you can either present your own work there, or you can maybe participate in some open source project. For example, iPlug2, to name an example. And additionally, you can also try to present on conferences or on YouTube your work, or in various forums, and you can also try to help others. And so I think people can take away a lot from this. Is there anything you'd like to add on this?
Yeah, I think maybe just don't be too afraid of getting involved with these communities or presenting things, because everyone gets better the more they do these things, and you can't hide your work forever until you reach a certain standard. I shudder a bit to think of some of the stuff that people might find, like the questions that I asked on the MaximSP forum 20 years ago, this kind of thing. But yeah, it doesn't really matter at the end of the day. People can see what you your early work, and they can see what you do now, and they can come to their own conclusion about whether they hire you or not, or this kind of thing. So I just don't be afraid to get involved, and maybe put stuff up publicly, even if it's not perfect.
Okay, that's also a very good tip for me, because I'm always very insecure about the code I write. I want to really make it perfect before I show it to anyone. But definitely, it's easier to criticize someone than to step up and show what you've been working on, even if it's not perfect. So yeah, thank you for these words as well. You also said about collaborating or like working with big brands, and what really struck me is that you've done contract work for Focusrite on the plugin suite that actually is shipped with their Scarlett interfaces. So I as I understand correctly, it's the Red plugin suite, which also I use heavily. So it's it's really cool to be able to talk to you about this. So how this opportunity did come to life, and how did this whole process look like?
So yeah, this was quite a long time ago, but it basically came about because I was the iPlug guy online, and Focusrite had some legacy plugins that were built using iPlug, they at that time they were quite a different kind of company. They weren't publicly traded, and so yeah, it was. I think it was probably a lot smaller, and maybe didn't have so many in-house people for certain things. So yeah, they needed to maintain some products and to release some new ones. I was involved as a contractor for that. Because these old plugins were built with iPlug, I was able to quickly get new versions up and running, and stuff like this. I'm pretty sure they're very much using JUCE these days based on their conference presentations. And I don't think they've switched to iPlug2, unfortunately, but never mind.
Okay, but speaking of iPlug2, we're circling around this topic, and I think it's finally time to delve into it. I think as you said, if anyone knows iPlug2, they know you. If anyone knows you online, they know iPlug2. So could you describe your history with the original iPlug and how did iPlug2 then come to life?
Yeah, so the original iPlug was released in 2008. I found it and found it was a very simple implementation of a plugin, the sort of abstraction of a plugin, the class that you implement to make your plugin. It was very easy to get my head around. This is when I was far less experienced with C++ and not very confident at all with it. But it was very easy to understand. One line to create a parameter, to set up the range of the parameter and the units and things like that. One function that processes the audio, one function that called when the sample rate changes, this kind of thing. It was just a really minimal plugin abstraction. So I was able to use that to make my first C++ plugin, Endless Series, and I because iPlug was open source and liberally licensed, I made my own version, and I explicitly tried to make very good template projects, so an Xcode project and a Visual Studio project that anyone could just open and click compile. Okay, maybe they had to install the VST2 SDK first, but once you did that, the project should just build a plugin. And this was because I got so frustrated in the past with other libraries that didn't have examples that compiled. So yeah, I made this template project, which is actually still kind of there in iPlug2 these days, and it was just something that let you compile all the different formats pretty simply, so that you could just jump in and implement the plugin code without worrying too much, without writing loads of boilerplate code each time. Yeah. Also, making a GUI in iPlug is very simple. It's a bit like when you're declaring parameters, it's just like one line of code to add one of the classes for making a dial or a slider. And yeah, I built up my own version, which was called WDL-OL. iPlug was part of a library called WDL, which is the developers of repo put all their open source code in this repo. They've since removed iPlug because they weren't maintaining that, and my version WDL-OL was kind of the one that everyone was using for a while because it was the most heavily maintained. And at this stage, JUCE was basically one person. This was before it got acquired by Raleigh, and it wasn't such a competitive. It wasn't a no-brainer for a company to use JUCE at that point. Nowadays JUCE is an incredibly impressive product that's impossible for an individual to sort of compete with. It's got sort of 4 or 5 very talented engineers who are paid well to work on it every day and to document it well and to make extremely good or make tests to make sure all the functionality works properly. So yeah, it's quite a different thing now to what it was then. And at that time, like, lots of different individuals had their own plugin frameworks or way of doing VST and audio unit from the same code base. And so iPlug was a bit of a stronger contender for what people might choose to use. So yeah, it was something that stuck around for quite a while. I actually kind of switched to using JUCE until I was doing that PhD, and I was doing lots of changes to JUCE to make my own plugin implementation that was a bit simpler, and I was sort of thinking, well, I've got this iPlug thing, and why don't I carry on with that? Because in the past, I mentioned that I used different technologies to make plugins over the years, and I always got a bit frustrated that there were certain things that I couldn't have ownership of, certain bits of the code in the product that I was shipping that if I found a problem, I wasn't able to fix that because it was in the third-party code. And although with JUCE it's a different situation because you have the source code, so it's highly likely that you can track down a bug even if it is in the JUCE code base. But in that case, you have to submit a pull request to the JUCE developers, and it's very likely that it's not in the format that they want, and it might be in a backlog of 1,000 other pull requests from other developers. And so what happens a lot is that companies and individuals end up maintaining a fork of JUCE where they've got all these different changes to JUCE. That means that every time JUCE gets updated, they have to like reapply their changes, and hopefully they don't break. And there's also something weird, I think, about people who invest lots of their own personal time into making stuff for the JUCE ecosystem, because at the end of the day, that is a commercial product and it is owned by some people who you're making them richer by making their product more competitive or things like this. So I felt a stronger alignment to the sort of liberally licensed open source ethos, and thought I'm better off investing my time in making my own plugin framework, which I can have complete ownership of, rather than trying to keep track with JUCE. Sometimes I wonder whether this was the right decision or not, because I think I could have shipped many more products had I not done this, because I obviously spend a lot of my time fixing bugs in the framework rather than shipping products. So that's kind of why I say it's a bit of a no-brainer, or like it's a good business decision for people to use JUCE, because like you don't want to have to spend all your time making things work on the latest version of Mac OS or the latest, whatever thing Apple changed this time. You'd much like, if you're a small plugin company, it's much better if you spend time innovating, making a great new synthesizer or a great new effect. And all these things take a lot of time, and so I can understand why companies these days look at a product like JUCE and say, like, that is a very good business decision for us to use that. But then sometimes things happen, like with the recent fiasco to do with the Unity game development framework, where the owners of the company decided that they need to make more money, so they changed the licensing structure. And now lots of game developers whose whole careers were based on that particular framework find themselves in an awkward position, because their indie game, which was based on a certain revenue model, like, is now not financially viable or something like that. So yeah, there are advantages to basing your product on liberally licensed source code or source code that you have ownership of or can have some kind of ownership of. So yeah, I think there's still a place for iPlug2 alongside JUCE, and it's certainly like I feel happy that I have that available to me, set up the way that I like. And for instance, I've used it in a new project that I'm presenting at ADC, which is a library that I might license to people in the future, if anyone's interested. And I've used it to develop some audio unit plugins that go inside that library. And obviously, if they were built with JUCE, then this would be a different situation because I don't have the rights to do that. Potentially, yeah, it depends on the circumstances. But I am pleased to have iPlug2 available. I should mention as well that iPlug2 is not just me. It's a huge amount of the work has been done by Alex Harker, who is a very talented programmer who also uses iPlug, and he's done lots of the stuff to do with the graphics elements of it, which is all very complicated stuff. So yeah, he deserves equal credit for iPlug2.
That's really, really cool. And I especially was amazed that, if I understand correctly, if you create your plugin with iPlug2, then you can not only deploy your code into a plugin for a digital audio workstation, but it's also set up for iOS, right? But also for the web. Am I correct? That you can easily create a website that runs this audio code using WebAssembly.
Yeah, exactly. So I went to the first ever web audio conference, and when I was there was a presentation by this guy called Jari Klamola, who's a Finnish software engineer, who we share some interests like phase distortion synthesis. He'd written some papers that extended phase distortion synthesis and things like this. But anyway, at the Web Audio Conference, he was presenting some very interesting work that he'd done, where he had compiled some VST plugins to work in the web browser. And this was using a tool called mscripting, which was developed by someone at Mozilla, and it basically converted C++ code into a form of JavaScript. This was before WebAssembly existed. And yeah, because I was really into audio plugin development and well known because of iPlug, he was interested in collaborating on basically a more formalized version of what he had presented, an SDK for people to port their VST plugin code to work in the web browser. This was something that we worked on together called Web Audio Modules, and I think we presented a paper at the I think it was maybe NIME or I can't remember exactly which conference it was, but it was in I think SMC conference in 2015. We presented version 1 of Web Audio Modules, and this was a C API plus some JavaScript boilerplate to let you load this ASM.js code in and run your audio plugin, integrating it with the Web Audio API. Later on, we updated it because WebAssembly was released, and this is a much more standardized way of creating a binary that will run on all sorts of different platforms, including in the web browser. So yeah, the a later paper we did included support for WebAssembly. And yeah, this is part of the reason why I kind of got interested in developing iPlug into iPlug2, was thinking about how we could use this or develop this API in a way that you could easily produce a web page from the C++ code. So exactly the same plugin abstraction could be used for VST on the desktop, as well as a web page, so that anyone could try your audio processing code just by visiting a URL. And yeah, so I basically rewrote iPlug2's the way that you interact with parameters, and there's some specifics to do with how the web audio API deals with audio processing, and how you can have, in order to make a GUI, you have to make a completely separate binary, so that the GUI has to be done in one bit of WebAssembly and the audio processing has to be done in another bit of WebAssembly. And it required some changes to the way that the framework worked so that this was possible without making it very complicated. So you can still use the same sort of simple iPlug plugin abstraction class and quite easily convert that into this format that works as a web page, which is actually two different WebAssembly versions of your plugin, one for the GUI, one for the DSP, communicating via messages. Yeah, it's relatively complicated, but it works, and it's been used by Surreal Machines, which is a nice plugin company who've built it into their website. So they've got a demo of their plugin that just runs on the web page. People can play a few different audio examples through that and play around with the parameters, and that's a lot quicker than installing a VST and that kind of thing. Yeah, it's not ideal. It's kind of like a proof of concept still a bit, because one thing about converting C++ code to WebAssembly is that you end up reproducing a lot of what's already available in the browser. So browsers are really excellent for doing user interfaces, but when we convert an iPlug plugin to work in the browser, it's recompiling all of the iPlug graphics engine, and as well as sort of duplicating functionality that's already in the browser, it ends up bloating the binary quite a lot. So, websites are meant to be small things, and people obsess about making them, 10 kilobytes or 20 kilobytes. But if you convert a plugin that's written in C++ to WebAssembly, unfortunately, it's going to end up being a bit bigger than that. But for certain circumstances, that doesn't matter that much. Yeah.
So that's really amazing, because of how much work went into this framework, especially that it's not how to say it, commercially funded at the same time. And also it's amazing that you not only developed iPlug2 but also web audio modules that are currently they were also presented at ADC last year by Michel Bouffa.
Yeah, so
that's the same thing, right?
Yeah, so Yari and myself are not so much involved with it now, but there's lots of other people interested in this idea, and so there is a team of maybe 10 or so people some of whom are developing web-based DAWs, and I think Michel is developing a sort of pedal board. He's really into guitar, and so they take the project forward and sort of it was the problem originally with it was that it was a little bit of a chicken and egg situation. There wasn't really a web-based DAW to load plugins into. So the iPlug2 stuff that just produces a standalone web page which hosts the plugin, but you can't really create multiple. You can't create a network of iPlug2 web audio modules. So yeah, this group of people they take it a bit further and they develop more of an API about how to connect these things together. And yeah, it's I've seen some pretty cool demos.
Yeah, and if such a DAW in the browser eventually appears, the web audio modules will be there.
Yeah, for sure.
And I wanted to ask you maybe one more question about iPlug2, because it's then such a large framework, and obviously you need to deal with a lot of platforms. As I understand, you are also working on supporting Linux and CMake. Could you maybe share what were the biggest challenges from working on such a framework from your personal perspective?
Let me trying to think. Certainly, I find because I'm not really using Linux in a desktop environment on a daily basis, the progress has been very slow there. So, yeah, we've had quite a few contributions from third parties, but because it's not something that is directly linked to anything that I want to release, any product I'm working on, or I find it hard to find the time to dedicate to getting the necessary work done to merge all of that code. So I feel a little bit bad about that, because we have had some very good contributions from third parties. So yeah, the main problem is time. Is there's just not enough time to make it quite how I want it to be. Yeah, we received quite a bit of funding from Google, but unfortunately haven't had the time yet to spend that. And we are looking for people who might be able to develop the Linux support and this kind of thing. So if you're one of those, please reach out. But yeah, I guess yeah, supporting all of the different platforms, I find it yeah, I obviously I work now in the industry, and I've had a lot of experience of how audio software that goes to many users is developed in the industry. And having learned all about this kind of side of audio programming, there's lots of things I'd like to change about iPlug2. I'd like to, have very rigorous testing on every single aspect of it, but unfortunately there's just not enough time to think about those things. And I'd much rather, if I've got a little bit of time to work on it, focus on adding a function or adding functionality to do something creative with it, some kind of new cool GUI feature, or some little DSP class that's going to be useful for everyone. I'd much rather work on something fun like that with my spare time than add all of the sort of industrial quality code checks. And I'd love to rewrite the whole thing from scratch, to be honest, but that's not going to happen anytime soon.
iPlug3 then.
Yeah.
And regarding your personal projects, could you share a little bit more about the project you mentioned about spatial audio that you're working on for ADC 23?
Yeah, so for a few years now, I've been working on an iOS app. It's also a macOS app, and it's a spatial audio file player. So, as I mentioned earlier, I've always been working with ambisonics, and this was my spatial audio format of choice. But a lot of the sort of plugins that are coming out these days, and a lot of the distribution for spatial audio is centered around Dolby Atmos, which is a different kind of spatial audio. It's object-based spatial audio. But there's lots of composers and engineers, artists who work with ambisonics. Lots of people in the games industry use it to record 3D sounds for VR and things like this. So yeah, I've developed an app, and it's a way of playing back these files on iPhone or on Mac using AirPods or using any headphones, in fact, because I've basically added a way of doing head tracking using a machine learning algorithm using the webcam. So yeah, it's a spatial audio app that binauralizes ambisonic files, and a byproduct of it is an engine that other people could use to do the same thing in their own product, with a different GUI or maybe a specialized product for a particular album or something like this. So this is a Swift library. This is what my ADC talk is about. It's called Spatial Audio Kit, and it's basically a very simple way of playing back spatial audio files and getting the head tracking working with just a few lines of Swift code. Very easy to integrate into an app that you might build with Swift UI, which is Apple's latest and greatest UI framework. And yeah, it's really taking shape now. I still have to finish it for the ADC talk, but it's nearly there. And yeah, I'm excited to present it properly at ADC. So.
Yeah, me too, and I hope to be there to watch the presentation. And sorry for taking your time then of working on this project, but I really appreciate that you also took the time to share this story with the listeners. So maybe one last question about your career, if I may. You're now working at Ableton as a full-time developer, if I understand it correctly. And could you maybe tell the story of how it came to be, and why did you make this decision to move to Berlin?
Yeah, so I was doing some freelancing for the company Surreal Machines that I mentioned earlier. I actually built the web-based demo of their product. And yes, my colleague at Ableton is involved with that company and was forming a new team here, and was looking for people to form that team with, and obviously liked what I did, and so yeah, I sort of had. I didn't apply to a job advert. I through a connection that I'd made over many years, I was in the right place at the right time to be asked, "Oh, you wouldn't like to come and work at Ableton, would you?" Obviously, then I had to do coding challenges and several interviews and things like this, but luckily I passed. So yeah, that's how I ended up here.
Nice. And what can you share? Maybe what are you working on at Ableton?
I cannot share you what I'm working on, unfortunately. I am in the sound team, which is broadly responsible for instruments and effects, and we also have lots of people working on sound content for packs and for third-party packs. But I can tell you I'm working on something very, very exciting. It's really a fun thing to be working on. It's not like anything I've done before. And I'm excited for when people will finally get to experience it. It's also, it's personally exciting for me working on something that's going to affect such a vast amount of people. Previously, I've made some plugins which sold a few copies, but nowhere near the kind of, they didn't have anywhere near the kind of reach that Ableton has. So that's really exciting.
I understand, and I'm excited also to learn about this in the future when the thing gets finally released. So you obviously had a very intensive career. You dipped your fingers in a lot of different areas of DSP, and it seems to me that you used practically every possible audio technology out there. So SynthEdit, Max MSP, and then C++, then all the web stuff, now the Swift, and I think you also were involved with Faust, right, to integrate it into iPlug2, and probably a lot of other things that we haven't mentioned here. Could you maybe share what's your process of learning these things? How do you go about learning all these new technologies? Or is it that they're all the same? It's just the minor details that vary?
It varies a lot there. They're not all the same. It's hard to describe how I learn these things, but it often starts with finding examples that are out there, like looking for an open source project that someone's built with Faust, or going through the Faust examples. Faust is really, one of the best things about it is it's got an amazing library of DSP that it comes with. So there's lots of stuff to learn from there. I'm quite, I persevere quite a lot. When something doesn't work, I keep on trying. That might be a blessing or it might be a curse, but I'm not sure. Eventually, I managed to learn these things. Sometimes I might basically be cargo culting, copy pasting bits of code, and I'm not ashamed to admit, but I don't try and if I'm trying to do something in Swift, I might start with an example of the thing that I'm trying to do that someone made, and then I might adapt what they made to do what I want to do, rather than spend 6 weeks with the Apple documentation working out how to build that thing from scratch. I'm not saying this is the best way for everyone to do such things, and sometimes I find there's gaps in my knowledge, which is a bit frustrating, and I kind of wish that I had learned all of the basics of a language, for instance. I like to I like the things that I make to see the light of day. I like to ship things, and sometimes that involves a little bit of a few shortcuts to get there. But I don't know if that answers your question or not. But
I definitely. So it's your style is to look at examples and example projects, and ideally start with some template or some basic setup, and then to modify from there. I think it's a very good approach, but then you hit some barriers where you don't even know what to Google for to find a particular missing step, but you eventually also overcome this. So I don't see why this approach wouldn't be a valid one, especially with all your track record of plugins and frameworks and whatnot. Sorry, you wanted to add to this?
Yeah, I mean, one thing that I think is very useful is if you've got the skills to make little test tools like command line tools or shell scripts or Python scripts. If you're not sure about like certain aspects of what an example that you're trying to implement, like breaking things down and like reproducing them on that kind of level, I find is something that I often do, and I find that technique very useful. And yeah, in this day and age, when you have something like ChatGPT available, which is, although it might not be able to like make a product from scratch for you, like I think a lot of people are saying, "Oh, please make me this a synthesizer plugin or something like that." That's not gonna work. I feel like if you have some experience of developing these things, using something like ChatGPT, you can accelerate the rate at which you can try things out. So I just talked about making little tools to test things, but ChatGPT is absolutely excellent at doing that kind of thing, where it's not that good at making VST plugins or complete products. So yeah, I think that's quite an exciting development. And one more thing is that there's interesting sort of just-in-time compilation-based tools coming out. So Faust has had a JIT compiler for quite a long time, and MaxMSP has a new technology called Rainbow, which is a similar kind of just-in-time compilation. So you get very good performance, but you can iterate very quickly in a sort of familiar graphical environment. C Major is another example of that similar technology, but more based on text-based code. And I think being able to iterate on things very quickly with instant results and also get good performance is a real luxury that everyone should take advantage of. Yeah, I think it's going to help people be creative when they don't have to spend ages dealing with compiler errors and stuff like that, and out of bounds memory access, or things just crashing. Yeah.
Or implicit float to int conversion.
Yeah. Oh, that's boring.
That's a big one. That's a big one.
Yeah.
So speaking of being creative, because you know so many technologies that are related to developing audio software, if you were to sit down and prototype and develop an audio plugin, what technical stack would you use?
I have to be honest and say I just would make an iPlug C++ project because I am so familiar with this process that is the quickest way for me to do such a thing. I have my own DSP library that I've built up over the years, and I can piece things together using that in much a similar way as you might do with something like Max or any of these languages that have got a library of DSP code with them. I would do it with iPlug. It lets me make something very quickly. I don't have to do lots of boilerplate code. I can do parameters with one line. This kind of thing makes it all very easy for me to just fire up a new iPlug project. I can completely understand how someone could do the same thing with a great JUCE template, and I've seen some really nice ones lately. It's really fantastic when you can also have it set up with the CI stuff already there, so that you can even now click a use template button on GitHub, and you clone a repository, and everything is there ready for you. It already builds the thing in the cloud. So yeah, I love this kind of stuff, whether it's iPlug or JUCE or whatever framework you want to use. It's amazing what you can do very quickly these days.
Yeah, so I wholeheartedly agree. And I ended up, because some patterns repeat over and over again, I also ended up writing my own template for an audio plugin with JUCE, but also with package management and unit tests. And I then started using it on my own. So that was a shameless plug that everyone should check out, my audio plugin template. Hint, hint. And are you then, I guess then you develop on Mac, right?
I'm mainly using Mac day to day, but I use Windows all the time as well. I have a Mac laptop, but I have a Windows desktop. I have to use Mac and Windows, and also Linux for work. I'm normally, if I'm just trying to experiment with something, I'm doing that on my Mac. I use VS Code, I use Xcode, and I use the command line a lot. That's pretty much my stack of tools.
Okay, thank you for sharing, because at least we know that it's you behind all this, not some secret powerful technology that no one has access to. And if someone wanted to follow your steps and also learn audio programming, I know that in the scope of our discussion, it's a very broad topic, because what do we mean now by audio programming specifically? But which resources would you recommend? For example, I know you have this awesome music DSP list on your GitHub. Is it the go-to place you'd recommend people to, or you would add something to this list now?
I try to keep that list up to date, and it is very personal. It's my favorite resources, and I think a bit unlike other awesome lists, it's got quite a lot of sort of explanations about why I like things. So some of these lists are just like links, which don't really say why you should click on that link or not. I would recommend people check out my awesome music DSP list. It's really an awesome audio programming list, but it's got some DSP, it's got some plugin frameworks, it's got some what are my favorite tools for development. It's got some links to YouTube videos. In terms of books, like I really like this old book called it's called it's by Dodge and JUCE, and it's called Computer Music, I think. Is that right? There's the Computer Music tutorial by Curtis Rhodes, and there's
I love this one.
That's recently had a new edition, I think.
Yeah, that's right.
But I think it's called Dodge and JUCE Computer Music, and what I liked about this one was it's got all these sort of block diagrams of these early synthesis techniques used, and it's quite. It's just got lots of these interesting early DSP techniques. The Computer Music tutorial kind of aged a little bit, but obviously it's been updated. But this one was more about the synthesis techniques. And I think the Will Perkle books, which I saw you did a review of, I think they're very good for someone wanting to get into audio plugin development. I think there's there's not many books that deal with these sort of like virtual analog techniques in the same way. So yeah, certainly if that's the kind of thing that you want to do, then check out those. I think that's about it. I mean, you'd be a fool not to join the Audio Programmer Discord, which is very, very active these days, if you're interested in that kind of thing. And yeah, I think there's lots of interesting initiatives to do with machine learning and audio as well, which is probably the next big thing. It's already the big thing, but yeah, if the whole sort of nature of audio plugins is sort of shifting towards using machine learning based techniques. So there's plenty of communities to join where you can learn about that kind of thing as well. Yeah, I think if I was just starting out now, I would try and get a handle on those kinds of technologies as well as some of the traditional audio programming techniques. But certain things are just entirely getting replaced by train a neural network to do that instead of like doing all this hand coded DSP. Like, and if the results are better, then you're going to waste your time by implementing it the hard way. If you've got, I think it's important to get the skills to train your own networks on things that are appropriate for that kind of task, and to understand when it's good to use one thing and when it's good to use the other. So I see you've done a few presentations about that kind of topic, showing people how to use a neural network in a plugin, and I think that's really cool. So definitely check out those those resources.
Yeah. So thank you very much. I think that's such lists are very helpful, and they're not always easy to find. And as you said, if you have an explanation why this particular position is on there, then people also can make a more informed decision whether to pursue certain technology or not. And at the end, maybe more leisure question is something that one question that I typically ask people is how they do unit testing of audio code. But the other question that I have is, do you listen to music while programming? So do you listen to music while programming?
I actually don't listen to music while programming, especially if I can hear something with lyrics in. It's impossible. I cannot focus on code and have a lyric in the background. But normally I like it to be very, very quiet when I'm coding.
Okay, yeah, I understand, and I really admire this approach. Maybe I'll get to this level one day. And the last question from my side is, if someone wanted to contact you, where do you recommend they go?
Well, probably LinkedIn, or you can find an email address on my website, which is olilarkin.co.uk. On LinkedIn, if you're going to send me a message, please write something, because I get quite a lot of people just adding me, and it's difficult to know why. Often it's because I work at Ableton and they want to get a job at Ableton. So give me a bit of an introduction to why you're messaging me, and it's more likely that I'm going to add you. So LinkedIn. I'm also on Twitter at Oli Larkin, but or X. I'm probably not going to be on that much longer, but we'll see. So.
Okay, thank you so much. I think you've broken a record, so I have my notes here. Definitely, there hasn't been an interview yet with so many positions here. Thank you so much for your time. I know that this podcast been running for over 1.5 hours. but I believe that the listeners will appreciate every bit of your story, all of your tips, and they also find the parts that they can relate to in their struggle to become audio programmers themselves. And definitely you are an inspiring figure for a lot of people. And to me personally, it's amazing how many different technologies, vastly different technologies you used with huge success, basically. So thank you once again for this interview, and good luck with your ADC 23 project and the talk. And I hope to see you in person in London.
Okay, thanks for having me. Look forward to see you too.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
All right, everyone. That was Oliver Larkin, an audio programming legend. Thanks a lot, Oli, for agreeing on this interview and staying so long to answer all of my questions. And to you, dear listeners, I can only say, please go to Audio Developers Conference 2023 and watch his talk. And while you're there, I also invite you to listen to my talk at this conference. If you're curious about the people, places, and references mentioned in this podcast episode, go to thewolfsound.com/talk015. You can find all the resources there. If you'd like to support this podcast in some way, then please consider giving it a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, subscribing on all the podcast streaming platforms, giving it a like on YouTube, and maybe comment. And of course, if you can, then subscribe to the channel as well. Thank you for listening. Thank you for all the feedback I got. I really, really appreciate your support. And if you're curious how to become someone like Oli Larkin, if you felt inspired, then maybe the audio plugin developer checklist is a resource for you at thewolfsound.com/checklist. Thanks for listening and see you in the next one. Take care.